What's going on, guys? Well, I'm sitting out here. It is a beautiful night. A little nippy, but hey, for the middle of the winter, it ain't bad. I'm sitting here in a t-shirt, smoking a nice little cigar. This is a Island Prince, my last one. A little cigarello there. Very tasty. But the reason I'm making this video is because I want to do a story time. I was actually just thinking about one of my childhood friends and how incredibly sad this story is, and I thought I'd share it with you guys. I'm not going to use this person's real name for obvious reasons, you know, in case family's watching or he's watching, whatever. I doubt he's watching. I honestly doubt he's even alive. But for the purpose of this video, I am going to call him Nick. Okay, that's not his real name, but let's just say his name was Nick. So, go back to about maybe 4th grade, okay? I was in 4th grade, and I met Nick. Now, Nick lived in my neighborhood. Nick was 3 years older than I was, okay? He was a really nice kid. I met him riding my bicycle. I remember the first time I was kind of branching out. I moved to this town in 3rd grade, West Milford, New Jersey. That is the real place I lived. Moved there in 3rd grade, and for about a year, you know, I obviously, you know, met a lot of friends, and my friend Chris and my friend Nigel and Drew, another awesome kid who unfortunately moved next year in 4th grade. Never heard from him again. But fast forward a year later, I'm kind of riding my bike around the neighborhood, and I see this kid, Nick, and he's in his driveway, and he's got a hockey stick in his hand, and he's slapping around a tennis ball. So I stopped my bike, and I said, hi. I'm like, hey, how's it going? Never saw him before. So he's like, hey, how's it going? And it's kind of like an awkward thing, you know. I don't usually put myself out there and try to meet people, but I literally happened to be driving by and with my bike, and this is probably 3 blocks down for where I was. And where I grew up in Pinecliff Lake, specifically in West Milford, New Jersey, all the streets run parallel. It's kind of like San Francisco. There's a big lake, you know, in the area, and there's one main street that goes along the lake, and then there's a street way up on the hill, you know, that run this way, and then all the streets run parallel with each other. So, you know, he's about 3 blocks down, 3 streets down. I'm going down the hill, riding my bike, see him, hi, how you doing? So we introduce ourselves, and I'm like, what are you doing, playing hockey? He's like, yeah, I love hockey. I remember Nick actually got me very much into hockey, and I remember a lot of my childhood playing sports outside with my friends, and one of the most fun thing we ever did was play hockey, okay, roller hockey. So we had our rollerblades, and we basically were beating the hell out of each other most of the time. It was like 90% checking each other into, there was like a grass hill next to his driveway. So it was mostly just an excuse to beat the hell out of each other. Very little hockey we actually played. I guess a way to get, you know, boys to get their aggression out. The other thing we love playing is football too, and even in 4th grade, all the way up to high school, you know, we used to go out, especially when it was raining, and we'd have these big muddy football games. And we weren't playing flag football, we were tackling each other. And that would usually end with one of the kids getting a little bit too hurt and getting pissed off, and I have whole other stories for that. Another kid, which I probably shouldn't use his real name, but real pussy, who lived down the street. He was the rich kid, and he was kind of an ass. But anyway, let's not talk about him in this one. We'll talk about him in the future video. So anyway, back to Nick. So yeah, Nick got me into hockey. Prior, I was always a football fan. Loved the Giants, even though they lose most of the time. They're my team. I don't jump on the bandwagon. I'll always support the Giants, even though most of the time they piss me off. But anyway, but he got me very much into hockey, and specifically the Rangers. I was a big Rangers fan back in the day. Let my cigar go out here. Screw it. Let's finish the story. I'll light that up when I'm done. So, yeah, big hockey fan, Rangers. And we used to watch the Rangers games together and stuff, and I remember hanging out with him, and there was another kid, Steve, that lived down the road, and they were a little bit older than me. Steve was about 2 years older than me. Nick, again, was 3 years older than me. So I kind of felt cool hanging out with like the older kids and stuff. But once we started getting into, like, when I was in about 6th grade, these older kids were starting to smoke pot. And I remember the first time I ever smoked pot was behind my house. I remember Nick came over, and he came over to watch a movie, like Terminator. I think it was Terminator 2. Something like that. I don't know exactly what movie it was, but I remember he came over to watch a movie, and when he got here, he's like, "Hey, look what I got!" And he had a joint. He had a rolled joint, and I'm like, "Whoa, where'd you get that?" And he's like, "Oh, I got it from my dad." His dad smoked a lot of pot. I always remember because his dad used to keep his pot stash in the garage in an ammo can up in the beams, okay, because his garage wasn't finished. Many a times where I was over Nick's house and went to go visit the garage to pull from his stash. What's he gonna do? Yell at him? Hey, you're taking my pot? No. So anyway, so he's at my house and he's got this joint and he's like, "Hey, want to smoke it?" I'm like, "Well, did you ever smoke pot before?" And he's like, "Yeah, I just did it once, but like I barely took any and I didn't really feel anything." I'm like, "Okay, yeah, we'll try it. Why not?" I was a dumb kid. So we went in the back of my house. It was kind of U-shaped. There was this little nook back there, and it was private from everyone. Even our backyard, we had like a row of bushes that protected the view from the neighbor's house. But for the most part, the neighbor can see, except for this little nook. It was behind the laundry room, where my laundry room was on the other side of the wall. So we're back there, kind of hiding, and I bring a lighter back out of the house, and we spark it up. We start smoking it. A couple puffs, pass it off. A couple puffs, he goes until it's all done. So now we finish this joint, and I'm like, "Do you feel anything?" He's like, "No, I don't feel anything." I'm like, "Yeah, me neither. I feel fine." But I remember telling him how much I liked the taste of it. I specifically remember thinking, "Wow, it tastes really good. It's not like a cigarette or anything. It tastes great." Anyway, so we go back inside. I put the movie on. Okay, I want to say it was Terminator 2. Might have been the first Terminator. Anyway, so we're sitting on the couch. Before the movie even starts, he whips his head around, turns to me, goes, "Dude," he's like, "I'm messed up. I feel it." And before he can even finish what he was saying, I knew exactly what he was going to say, because it really hit me hard. And I felt the same way. I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm high." So we're talking about it with each other, "Oh, do you see anything?" Like, it was stupid kids, But I was really high, and he was really high. And then we started getting scared. I'm like, "Well, how long does it last?" He's like, "I don't know." I'm like, "Oh God, what if it lasts until like my parents get home? We're gonna get caught." And I remember like freaking out with him. And we went in the kitchen, and he always used to drink my dad's soda. Always. Back then, my dad used to drink a lot of Pepsi. Now he doesn't drink any Pepsi at all, really. He drinks Coke. I don't know why. I happen to like Coke way more than Pepsi. But that's nor here or there. So he went in there, drank a bunch of soda. I'm like, maybe if we eat something, we'll feel better. So, of course, at this point, the munchies start kicking in. We ate. There was pasta in the fridge, leftover pasta from the night before. We ate the whole bowl together. There was like a half a loaf of bread on the microwave. We made like 3 or 4 sandwiches each. Ate that. Then we made about a bag of popcorn. Ate the popcorn. I specifically remember trying to chew on the kernels, which I normally wouldn't do, but at this point I'm super high, and luckily I didn't break a tooth or anything. I was actually like so hungry after eating all that food that I was actually chewing on the unpopped popcorn kernels. So probably 2 hours go by, and at this point I'm really, really freaking out. I don't know what to do. Like, he's like, "Oh, it's not really as strong." And I'm like, "Well, mine's just as strong." So he's like, "Oh, don't worry about it, just eat some more food." So, we ate some more food. I don't know. We shared a jar of pickles. At this point, I'm starting to feel really sick because I ate way too much food. And then finally, I start to subside a little bit. I start to feel like it's not as strong, right? So, literally, like the second it kind of wears off enough where we're acting normal, my mom walks in. "Hey, how you guys doing?" I'm like, "Oh, we're doing good." Of course, we're acting all weird and fishy and stuff, like she knows. So we got on our bikes and we rode back to his house. And I remember we were cracking up for hours talking about, how close it was to getting caught, and like how awesome it was to feel high. And, this is a true story. If you want to know my feelings about smoking weed and being a teenager, watch my other video, my vlog on marijuana. I don't recommend it for kids. Yeah, it's fun. I'm not going to lie. It's a lot of fun. But it's a bad decision, so don't do it. So I'm just telling you a story, but I know there's some kids watching right now. I have to take a moment to tell you, just don't do it, okay? Just if you want to do that as an adult, that's a whole different thing. I don't condone any kind of drug use or drinking or anything like that underage at all, okay? Learn from my mistakes and many others. So that was like my first big time hanging out with Nick, okay? So we were best buds. It was weird because there was different groups of people that I would hang out with. Like when I was with Nick, it would be Nick and Steve, and it would be the three of us, and they were the older kids, Or if I was with my friend Chris, who I spent most of my youth with, if I was with Chris, it was a different group of kids. It was Chris and Nigel, and Mike and other people. But I had lots and lots of fun with Nick and Steve, and specifically just me and Nick, because we kind of got along more. He was kind of definitely not a hippie. I don't know how to describe him. We kind of got into a time where we were like really into like Jimi Hendrix and Pink Floyd and like the Beatles, and like we would listen to really, really good music and Eric Clapton, and we would just kind of zone out at his house, Of course, we smoke some weed and just sit there and listen to music and like dissect it and like, oh, what did he mean when he said this? And like it was really trippy, I guess you could say. And those were like my moments with him. And more times than not, when I was with him, we were smoking weed. Whereas like when I was with Chris, we would do other things. We'd be active, And as the years pass, Nick started to not show up so much at like, the games, like when we're playing football or playing hockey. Wait for it. Wait for it. Got Fast and Furious over here. Surprised they didn't rip down the road. Anyway, so there's like maybe 5 kids who live like in the area, and they love to just drive around because they have nothing else to do, and they got their fart cans, and they stop over here and they go, nee, nee. Anyway, okay, so I got distracted. So yeah, as the years go by, now I'm in like probably maybe 8th grade, going to high school, 9th grade. And I see Nick all the time, when we hang out occasionally. But I'm starting to really spend more time with Chris and that group of friends. So, but what I've noticed is that he doesn't really show up as much. He doesn't hang out as much. And he started having a lot of home problems. His mother and father, I always felt like they were nice people. But they really didn't get along. They were going through what eventually became a really bad divorce. There was constant fighting. Nick had 2 other brothers, by the way, 2 younger brothers. And it's kind of like they favored the younger brothers a little bit more than him. Something I didn't mention either is that he was in like a lot of slower classes. He wasn't retarded by any means at all, but he had some learning disabilities. Okay, so he got a lot of flack, in life for that. And now at this point, when he's well into high school and I'm going into high school, actually he's about to graduate. At this time in life, he's really depressed. I mean, like really depressed. His parents just constantly fighting. He's fighting with his brothers all the time. Doesn't have a girlfriend, doesn't have a love life, anything like that. And he's starting to smoke a lot. I mean, really just getting high all the time. Sit in his room, just listening to like Jim Morrison, Doors and stuff, and he would go through phases of like certain bands, and like I remember his Oasis fan where he would listen to Oasis for like 6 months, and he just listened to the same songs over and over and over again, and just really just like try to relate it to his life, but just super, super depressed. And at some point, I knew that he was, I don't want to say bringing me down, but he wasn't a good influence. I loved spending time with him, and he had he had an awesome personality. He really did, and it dissipated with his parents fighting and eventually getting divorced and splitting up. His life went down the shitter. Although I was there for him a lot, he kind of wanted to be alone more as time went on. All right, sorry about that. Battery died on me. So yeah, I was talking about Nick and the years passing. He had a lot of other bad influences too. He started hanging out with some other kids. There was one particular kid who was even a year older than him. So he's 4 years older than me and 1 year older than Nick. His name was Rob. and Rob was a very bad influence on him. Rob did some shady stuff. He was a big pothead too, but he was also into some harder drugs. He would do coke a lot. He would pop pills, and eventually he got into heroin. And so Nick, he kind of related to Rob a little bit more, and he started hanging out with him more, and he distanced himself from me a little bit. And I think I did the same thing just because I saw the path he was going down. And I specifically remember one conversation I had with Nick where he called me on the phone and he's like, "Hey man, we haven't seen each other in a couple months. You wanna hang out?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's awesome. I love to hang out with you. At this point in my life, I got a lot of other stuff going on, and I'm definitely spending way more time with like Chris and that group of kids. But I was excited. I'm like, damn, I haven't seen you in a long time. I'd love to spend some time and catch up and all that." And I remember him telling me, he's like, "Yeah, man, I got some H, and we're gonna party at blah blah blah." And H, obviously heroin. And I remember thinking, Jesus Christ, man, I'm not gonna do heroin. I remember telling him, I'm like, "Well, where are you gonna go?" And he's like, "Oh, we're gonna go to this party." I'm like, "Well, who's gonna be there?" He's like, "It's just me and Rob and a couple girls and stuff." And the girls ended up being prostitutes, which they hired from who knows where. It was a really, really weird situation, and I remember how awkward the conversation was, and this is the first time that I ever knew that he was doing heroin. And number one, there's no way I was going to go into that situation. Number two, there's no way that I was going to try heroin. I had no interest at all. Never did, never will. I used to always be content with smoking a joint. You know what I mean? Even like the kids in my group, they would smoke weed, but they would be like, "Yeah, let's do some bong rips. Okay, now let's do the gravity bong now. Yeah, man, let's roll a big blunt." I'm like, "Dude, I'm high. I don't need to keep smoking weed. You're just kind of wasting weed. Like, I don't need to plateau and get like so high I can't move. I just like getting high. Smoke a joint, relax a little bit, but still have some function. I can get up and be able to move and stuff." So, a lot of these kids, and even today, man, you want to smoke so much weed that you can't even move. You get couch locked. That wasn't me. I like getting a buzz. It's like now, if I drink beer, I don't want to get drunk. I want to get a nice little buzz, and that's it. I want to be in control. But anyway, that's besides the point. So I was having this conversation on the phone. I'm like, "Nick, man, I can't go." He's like, "Why? Why not? We haven't seen each other so long." I'm like, "Listen, I'm not into that. I'm not gonna. I don't do heroin. I'm not gonna start. I'm not gonna try it. I don't want to be around it. To be honest." I said, "I don't want to hurt your feelings or anything, but I don't even want to be there in case cops bust in or something goes wrong or someone gets hurt. I don't want to be around that." And he's like, "Listen, I understand." He's like, "Maybe we'll hang out. I'll call you tomorrow." So I'm like, "Okay, fine." And I remember getting off the phone with him and just being so upset. I really was really upset. I'm like, "I can't believe it. He's doing like some really hard drugs." I had no idea. And I said, "All right, well, maybe he'll call me tomorrow and we'll talk about stuff." And the next day came and he never called me. And a week went by, he never called me. And at this point, I'm like a senior in high school, okay? And he kind of faded out of my life. But I would think about him occasionally, and I would call him. And, his mom would pick up or his dad would pick up, and because they were getting divorced, but they were still in the same house. They didn't have enough money for one of them to split. So, his life was getting really rough. But I remember thinking about him all the time, and I would call and he would never be around. Like, "Oh, I don't know where the hell he was." And the dad was as years went by, he started becoming assholes. "I don't know where the hell that prick is, whatever." Like, Jesus Christ, man, that's your kid. You don't know where he is. But I had a very hard time getting a hold of him. And I'll never forget this. I will never forget this. I was driving my car. This was after I graduated, okay? I was driving my car. I was alone. I went to Chris's house, and I forget what we were doing. I think he was actually going to go to another party, and I'm like, I don't really want to go. And so I ended up going home, and as I was driving home, it was kind of raining out. And I was coming down the block where Nick lived, to cut through to get to my house. And I saw him walking on the road. He had a jacket on, he's like soaking wet. And stopped. I'm like, "Oh man, Nick." I'm like, "Hop in, I'll give you a ride. Where are you going?" And he's like, "Excuse me?" And I'm like, "Hop in, man. You're getting wet. I'll give you a ride." He's like, "No, I'm good." And I'm like, what are you talking about? You're soaking wet. He was really, really high on something. I don't know what it is, but it certainly wasn't a joint. Okay, he was doing some hard stuff, and I'm like, come on, like, what's your problem, man? Come on, hop in. I'll give you a ride. Where are you going? He's like, oh, I'm going down to the store. And he's like, do I know you? I'm like, it's Jeff. It's me. What do you mean? Stop fucking around with me. Stop screwing around. What are you talking about? And he's like, Jeff. He's like, ah. Oh. And he looked really confused. He didn't recognize me. He didn't know who I was. He was so high and so in his world that he didn't even recognize me. I was completely blown away by that. I'm like, you sure you don't want to ride? And he's like, yeah, no, it's okay. And he's mumbling, by the way. He's barely coherent at this point. I'm like, all right. You know, and I drove off, and I remember going home, and I called Chris right away. I'm like, because Chris, he knew Nick. You know, he knew him personally, too. We hung out together on many occasions. But again, as time went on, it was more like he faded out, and me and Chris and those group of kids were together. And I told him, he's like, Jesus Christ, man, that guy's going down the hill. And I remember crying. I remember actually just sobbing and thinking about him and thinking, you know, what the hell happened to his life? It was so incredibly sad to me, what happened to him. It was his home life. It was a combination of his home life. It was a combination of getting into hard drugs. It was a combination of not having a girl in his life that really cared about him, that he cared about, to kind of let him know. He really had no one that loved him. And he went down a very dark path. And I remember even after my family moved, years later, went back, you know, to the town to visit or to go see someone or whatever, or we're just passing through, and occasionally I'd see him, and he looked like shit. I mean, he looked like a bum. He must have been homeless. Multiple occasions I saw him, and there was a couple times where, like, I would go to stop, but I didn't. Like, I was almost afraid to hear what's going on. You know what I mean? I was almost afraid for him, again, to not recognize me and to go through that, and you know, to hear, I just didn't want to deal with it. I was in denial that even happened to him. I was really close with him. I mean, really close. We spent years hanging out together and talking about life and, you know, talking about girls and family. I mean, deep conversations. A lot of my other friends, not Chris. Chris was my best friend, you know, so I obviously had the same conversations with him as I was growing up. But even like before I was hanging out with Chris, I had some deep conversations with Nick. And, to see his life go down the drain like that, it killed me. Occasionally, I still, like right now, I was just thinking about him randomly. I was smoking a cigar, and he just popped in my head, thinking, like, I wonder if he's still alive. And I'd be extremely surprised if he was. At this point, he's probably overdosed on something. And I can't tell you how sad that is, how much of a waste of life that was. He was a really loving, caring person that was misunderstood. And his situation brought him to the deepest depths of hell, his living hell. And, you know, maybe that's the best thing. Maybe if he is gone, he's finally released of that pain, because that kid was always in pain since the day I met him. He used to have happier moments, but he was always suffering in some way. It was just a lack of love, poor friend choices, and depression. It's just really sad. Oh my God. So part of the reason for me to tell you guys this story is because I'm just thinking about it, you know, and I want to share my feelings, my thoughts, you know. I think a lot of people can relate to this. Maybe not specifically with someone who got hooked on heroin, but I think everyone has a friend or knew someone whose life just went down the shitter. Whether they got divorced or, you know, broke up with the love of their life, or whether in this case they got into drugs or who knows what. But depression is a killer. It's very hard, as a lot of people will get into depressed state, and in this case he had no one to pull him out. Luckily, a lot of people have loved ones around them that constantly remind them that life is worth living. Life is an amazing thing. It's what you make it, though. You know what I mean? You remember? not trying to make light of things because I'm so sad thinking about this, but I was thinking of what is it? Joe Dirt. He's walking down the street, and he's talking about home or something, and the farmer guy, I forget his name. He's like, "Home with the way you make it, boy." And he's like, "You like to see homos naked?" He's like, "No, no, no. Home with the way you make it. Shit, everyone know that." And then he walks away, and Joe Dirt's like, "I like to see homos naked. Doesn't help me out." But it's true. Home is where you make it. Life is what you make it. We all have shortcomings. We all have problems constantly. But to find your happiness, you have to overcome them. You know, you have to be strong. And ultimately, my friend Nick was not strong. He was not strong inside, and he didn't have much to look forward to every day. And that was incredibly, incredibly sad. I mean, this kid opened up to me a lot. And I was constantly trying to be there for him, you know what I mean? But as time went on and as I got older, and especially when I got into harder drugs, I completely removed myself from that situation. And sometimes I blame myself a little bit. I have regrets, like what if I was that positive influence? What if I went there and said, "Hey man, don't do this, you don't need to do this." But you can't live life with what ifs, because you know what? Can't change it now. But I'm admitting to you guys that I always feel like, what if I was there for him more? What if something changed? I don't know. And that makes me very sad. That makes me think that maybe I did something wrong, you know? And I know a lot of you say, you know, don't beat yourself up. Yeah, well, I can't help it. Sometimes I think about them. Sometimes I think about the what ifs. We all do. I think it's natural. But the ultimate message here, if you kids missed it, and I'm sorry for cursing here, but don't fuck around with drugs, okay? Don't smoke crack, okay? Don't do meth. Don't do heroin, okay? Just stay away from drugs. There is nothing good that comes of drugs at all. It makes a sad person sadder. It makes a lonely person lonelier. There is no positive that ever comes from drugs at all. And I'm very thankful, and I think both my parents are very thankful, that I never had an interest in getting higher than just smoking a joint. I was always content with just smoking a joint. Now, obviously, I don't smoke weed, but occasionally I'll have a beer. I'm an adult, you know. I enjoy beer very much. I love craft beer, but I really don't enjoy getting super drunk. I just like a buzz every now and again, you know. The hell was that? Sound like a bottle rocket. Anyway, so yeah, there's my story of Nick. Just a real shame. Just a complete waste of life. Don't be that person. Don't be Nick. You know what I mean? So anyway, there's my story. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm going to light this cigar back up. And, of course, now that I've talked about it, I'll think about him some more. But that is a great tragedy. And like I said before, I think a lot of people can relate. A lot of people know someone like that in their life, you know, or they know someone who knows someone like that. It's very, very sad. So don't throw your life away with drugs. There's so much, oh my God, there's so much to be happy about. And as cliche as it sounds, you could be high on life. There's so many moments I'll just have with my wife, you know, or even with my dog, Gus, with my family, with my wife's family, my extended family. Just little moments here and there. You're just like so excited, so happy. And you know what? It feels just as good as lighting a joint. And although I never had heroin, I'm sure it feels even better than getting high like that. So anyway, that is it. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you guys have an awesome day. And I'll see you guys soon. Take care.